A lot of it boils down to this. I mean, when we were in high school, there was the popular crowd and maybe some not so popular crowds, and you had some kids who they would sacrifice anything to make sure they were never on the outs. And unfortunately, that mentality has spread into the rest of their lives. That
Mm-hmm.
well, the elites are telling me I have to think and behave in this way, so not only will I do that, but I'll also do their dirty work for them
Yeah.
by demonizing anybody who disagrees.
Yes.
And so dissident voices like you and me are just pushed to the side of the road. Now, the thing is, what I try to do in this Diary of a Psychosis book is to, in effect, I'm taking like a baseball bat. Like every single page is a baseball bat to
It
this whole narrative of
It is.
if you follow the restrictions, you're going to get good results. But if you're a backward stupid head who doesn't like science, then you're all going to drop dead. None of that survives any look at any chart or any numbers or whatever. But I like a lot of facts. I like a huge, absolutely irrefutable case. But there are really only two things that the average observer needs to know to be enough to explode the whole thing. And the first one involves the state where I live. So I live in Central Florida, and I have to say that if it had Ron DeSantis did something very important because apart from Sweden, he basically gave the world a control group. What happens if you don't follow Fauci? And it turns out nothing. Nothing happens. So the first of the two things is DeSantis versus Gavin Newsom. Now, if you look at those two places, Gavin Newsom had that place locked down so absurdly. He had the very last Disney property on earth to reopen. He let them reopen 15% with, I kid you not, the rule that you're not allowed to scream on the rides. Which, I mean, screaming on the rides is involuntary, but that was the first thing. But anyway, so when you look at the numbers, though, if you look at COVID numbers, first of all, you got to note that California has one of the youngest populations, and Florida is where everybody goes to retire.
Right.
You're correct for that. The numbers are basically indistinguishable. But what really matters is if you look at excess deaths, which that's the real number, because that includes the deaths caused by lockdowns, by depression, by suicide, by missed surgery, you include all that. It turns out Florida had a better outcome in terms of excess deaths than California did. Now, if you ask people in March 2020, what's going to happen if Florida ignores the advice and California follows it, they'd say, oh, California will do much better. Not one of them would have said Florida will do much better.
Right.
But it did. So that refutes it. And then the other thing is Sweden. Remember, we were all supposed to hate Sweden because they weren't locking down. Now, these are the same people who not 5 minutes earlier were telling us we should model our whole society on Sweden, right? They love Sweden. They love all the government spending and the programs and this, that, and the other thing. Yeah. But all of a sudden, we got to avoid Sweden like the plague. And so we were told if they don't lock down by June, they're going to have 96,000 deaths. Well, that was off by a factor of 24. Well, by the time this whole thing is over, and we look at all of Europe in terms of excess deaths, the country that did the best, as in number one, the best, was Sweden. So again, March 2020, if I said, what if Sweden doesn't do this stuff? How are they going to be? Well, they would have said probably dead last. Number one, the best. And what's even more interesting about this, on our side, we have Dr. Anthony Fauci, who gets lauded and celebrated everywhere he goes, and he gets favorable documentaries made about him, and everybody worships him. But in Sweden, I'll forget this in my middle age. In Sweden, their epidemiologist, Anders Tegnell, was condemned by the whole world for years, condemned. And he was saying, it's going to take 3 years for me to be vindicated. For 3 years, he was abused, called all kinds of names, denounced, threatened. And you know what? He turns out he was right. Could you imagine Anthony Fauci enduring 3 solid years of the whole medical establishment around the world attacking him? He wouldn't last 10 minutes.
Join us this week for Starting Strength Radio's next visit with Tom Woods. Tom has written this book, Diary of a Psychosis. It's about COVID-19. It's going to be an interesting show. It'll be free for you to watch on the network. And if you had any questions about your own behavior over the past 4 years, you need to watch this. Join us with Tom Woods on Starting Strength Radio.